The White House didn't blow up the night your name got there. It did something very strange. It went cold. The flow of information, the glow of screens, and the never-ending hum of reports and projections all seemed to pulse around one impossibility. The numbers ceased to make sense somewhere between their data and your reality. Individuals who have been trained to map out human behavior, estimate risks, and anticipate threats suddenly had a variable that they couldn't account for in any model. Their system wasn't compromised by you. Something worse was done by you. You made it obsolete. There was a pulse in the silent hallways where nations are decided. No camera captured a moment where the walls, which were constructed solely to house common people, were pressed up against the spiritual weight of who you have become. There were files for rebels, geniuses, criminals, and saints in their simulations, but not for someone who went through hell, returned change rather than destroyed, and then decided to choose peace over retaliation. The White House is capable of handling adversaries. It has no idea how to react to a soul that cannot be broken, awed, or blackmailed the old-fashioned way. You shut it down for that reason. In reality, the White House as a whole started out as a hesitancy in the center of an empire. The knowledge that their standard levers no longer operated on you, regardless of what you did, where you were, or how you moved. You got up without their consent, without their story. You recovered. In a society that benefits from maintaining instability, you found stability. Heaven was silently writing a different headline over your life, while simultaneously watching the exact scene they were freaking out over. The location that previously believed it would always be above. You had to confront a horrifying reality for the first time. A single human being who has finally realized their own worth is the most unpredictable force in their universe. You are that. Take a moment to react in whatever small ways you can. If this word is deeply affecting you, you know you're one of the few who can relate. To keep this message from being forgotten, please hit the like button to help us understand where these silent shutdowns of outdated systems are taking place worldwide. Please leave your city and country in the comments section. Tap the join button if you're moved to stand a little closer to what we're creating here. This channel has two basic tiers. One for people who simply wish to support this kind of message in a quiet way, and another for people who feel compelled to support more of the work. It's never a bargain with God or a ticket to a miracle. It's simply how we continue to get this kind of truth to the right people. Selected 1. Your name was printed in a different type of report before it ever appeared on a White House screen. There are no polls, approval ratings, or campaign donors in the invisible world. Only evidence is present. Proof of your decision when no one was looking. Proof of your treatment of people you didn't need. Evidence of your depth or cruelty as a result of pain. Heaven observed everything and started assembling something. No government in the world has a precise record of your soul. Heaven was tracking integrity, while they were busy tracking statistics. Heaven watched your self-control while they watched your posts. There was a line added to that brief each time. You had the option of exposing someone and staying silent instead. Another line was added, even though you wanted to vanish every late night. You whispered, "I'm not done yet." You believed those moments had disappeared into the night. They didn't. They were being gathered, weighed, and compared to a plan that predated even the Constitution. Something changed when that file hit a particular weight. You evolved into something more unique than just another citizen attempting to get by in their system. Someone their system was unable to predict with any degree of accuracy. At that point, heaven gave its command. Call them, not with an angel knocking on your door, but with an odd series of circumstances. The perfect word just when you were about to give up. The perfect video at the perfect time. There is no way this is random, you said after receiving the appropriate confirmation. The algorithm wasn't that. That was permission. You didn't just happen to be here. The way advisors are called into a room when history is about to change is how you were briefed into it. Your record demonstrated something the White House is only now beginning to understand, which is why your spirit was drawn into this season. The part they expected you to play is no longer appropriate for your character. You are perfect, so heaven did not call you. The real shutdown is your readiness, which is why heaven called you. Although your story has subtly moved on, their data still believes you are breakable. To turn off the lights, you didn't just walk into Washington and flip a switch. No headline can compare to the depth, quietness, and danger it poses to the status quo. When you shut down the White House as a whole, the version of you that their systems were designed to handle is no longer there. The version that was afraid, that easily distracted, easily guilt-tripped, and easily controlled is no longer there. And every lever they used, every story they told, and every tactic they used to keep people small was tailored for that older you. Their authority over you did not change when you changed. It cracked. Consider how the White House functions in reality. Information, perception, and prediction power it. For the machine to function properly, you must believe specific stories. Stories about whose voice matters and whose pain is a personal issue. About who matters and who doesn't, and about how far someone like you can go. Back then, those tales would stick in your head like a law, but then you kept getting hit by life. Additionally, it transformed you into something the system cannot recognize rather than a resentful replica of it. Someone who is self-aware and doesn't require a camera, a title, or a job. Something fundamental shut down the instant you stopped relying on their approval to feel real. The moment you stopped allowing their stories to control who you are. First, that shutdown was spiritual. The day you stopped praying and forced them to see me was the day you resumed praying and helped me realize my true self. It was the day you understood that while policies may have an impact on your situation, they do not have the power to determine your fate. It was the moment you silently refused to read from the script they had used to try to write your life through comparison, fear, and scarcity. That is catastrophic from their point of view. More disruptive than any protest is a citizen who is immune to manipulation by shame, fear, or artificial hopelessness. In their code, you turned into a blank space, and heaven called that empty space by its true name in the invisible world: liberty. Unbeknownst to you, you have spent your entire life undergoing basic training for a room you have never entered. Heaven labeled every lonesome bedroom, hospital corridor, and bus ride where you stare out the window while trying not to cry as preparation for high-level settings. You were being prepared for something far more perilous to the status quo, while they were preparing politicians for speeches and photo opportunities. Authority without a costume, power without an ego, and truth without a mask. Take a moment to glance back. Recall the instances in which you felt degraded, ignored, or deceived. Those were not isolated episodes of pain. They were models. Future world shakers survive and learn from simulations that the average person never recognizes. Your spirit was being trained to remain steadfast, even in the presence of influential people who have already made up their minds when they told lies about you and others believed them. When you put in a lot of effort and were still ignored, you were learning how to maintain your worth when the system did not recognize it. You were being taught how to act kindly in places that only know strategy. You extended forgiveness to those who didn't deserve it. Heaven isn't anxious. Then, when the spiritual camera moves from your past to the symbolic White House room, where your name is on the table, you have too much experience. You've Saturday in rooms where you thought you had no control and later realized you didn't, as everyone else nodded in agreement with a lie. You were the only one speaking the truth. No briefing, consultant, or diplomat could have prepared you for the pressure you've already experienced. That's why it throws everything off when they notice you. They are accustomed to people who are afraid of losing their reputation, status, or access. You've survived losing all of that before. They practice for the camera. Silence is what you train for. They developed their storytelling skills. You mastered the art of carrying one. Their talking points were practiced when it would have been simpler to harden. You practiced remaining human. Heaven now considers your past as if it were a finished course list in the invisible world. When your name landed on their desk, the shutdown didn't begin. Years ago, it began. You passed a test that no one on the planet even knew you were taking in every secret moment. Technically, it was your first time when your name finally came into contact with that degree of power. It was the first time your story was told in a room you had never been in. You had to ask, "Who is this?" When you first saw someone with clearances and badges you'll never see again. Protocol had to pulse and adapt for the first time around someone who didn't climb any of the typical ladders. You were a novice in that world on paper. On a spiritual level, however, you moved as though you had already experienced this 100 times and come out on top. They were rattled by that. They anticipated chaos, excitement, scurrying, excessive sharing, pleading, and acting. Instead, you were strangely calm, unnervingly centered, absolutely uninterested in chasing their approval. For them, that was the first sign. You weren't standing there as a guest. You were standing there as if you belonged wherever your feet touched. What nobody in that ecosystem fully understands is that your first test at their level came after a lifetime of tests at yours. You have already experienced family interventions where everyone misunderstood you and hearings without microphones. You've already made it through nights when your own thoughts tormented you until daybreak and interrogations without a lawyer. Guilt, fear, and self-doubt have already been used to cross-examine you, but you have decided to get up and continue. Therefore, it wasn't some careless promotion when heaven planned this moment. It was a commencement. This is why, despite the fact that you had never done this before, everything about you felt practiced. The way you didn't overshare and instead kept your peace. Despite the ease of spin, you opted for honesty. The fact that you didn't idolize or demonize anyone in that building, it appeared to them like unachievable poise. To heaven, it was merely a student taking the formal test for a course they had been taking covertly for years. You weren't lucky the first time around. You brought into a room that only saw the surface, a whole hidden history of practice. Because of this, it appeared to them that you closed the establishment without doing anything. The White House will never fully comprehend one aspect of you. The edge of their networks is where their power ends, but yours continues. A story that lives in people's hearts and minds cannot be stopped, even if they flag a name, freeze an account, or censor a headline. This phase of your life doesn't appear to be a gay protest because of this. It appears to be whispers that say, "Listen, this sounds like us." Late night messages, screenshots, dares, and quiet conversations. Heaven has already begun to treat you like a signal, while their systems examine you as an individual. Other sleepers are awakened by the frequency of one life. The shutdown didn't occur when you achieved mental freedom. Every time someone hears a story like yours and instantly recognizes their own, it gets deeper. Every time you decide to prioritize honesty over performance on the internet, whenever you are honest about what you have survived, you violate another unspoken agreement that kept people small each time you refuse to make your journey more palatable. They are unable to track that portion. The way bravery spreads, they constructed systems to keep an eye on threats, votes, and money. They never constructed one to keep an eye on what transpires when one courageous person speaks the truth and 1,000 silent people whisper, "Me too," and straighten up a bit. Scripture has always had a deeper understanding of this than any government agency. Remember to share and do good deeds. God is pleased with such sacrifices. 13:16 in Hebrews. Once more, the person who revitalizes others will also be rejuvenated. Proverbs 11:25. Feeding an algorithm is not the purpose of sharing. It's about not allowing light to remain imprisoned in one life. Therefore, don't just hold on to this word. If it confirms what you already sense in your spirit, give it to someone else. For one person who needs to be reminded that they are not alone, insane, or helpless, send it their way. That means you aren't employed by this channel. No administration on the planet can reverse what you're covertly doing, assisting heaven in spreading a story that they couldn't stop but never agreed with. If divine love is abundant in your heart, now is the ideal moment to share it. Click that super thanks button on YouTube and donate $20 or more to help spread God's blessings through this platform. This divine gift will impact not only your life, but also the souls of numerous others. God's grand plan contains a special place for each of you, and our prayers will be answered by your generosity. Act right away in order to elevate His kingdom. Spread your blessings, because you were made to accomplish even more in the tender care of God. God bless you. The White House appears to be the hub of the world from the outside. History, power, and decisions from the perspective of heaven. However, it is just another building on a map, another fleeting phase in which fragile individuals act as though they are permanent. Architecture, flags, or seals do not intimidate God's throne room. Speeches and motorcades don't impress it. How you treat those you don't have to impress is more important than how many people you command. And the entire scale of significance changes based on that metric. Your quiet life is louder in spirit than those noisy rooms. On some nights, meetings continue past midnight. Strategies are debated, policies are revised, and the lights in those offices remain on. You have also been awake on those same nights, but for a different reason. Because something in you kept saying, I want to be clean even if I'm tired. And because your conscience forbade you from taking revenge the way you were tempted to. And because your heart wouldn't allow you to become resentful. Those two scenes are viewed side by side up there. When their term is up, one group of people will no longer be fighting to preserve influence. A character that will reverberate throughout eternity is being defended by one soul. What battle does heaven zoom in on? You can close down the White House in part like that without ever entering its doors. You dispel the myth that the true story takes place in their rooms. You demonstrated by your actions that the most important discussions take place in the unseen agreements you make with your own soul rather than in front of microphones. I refuse to become what caused me pain. What I fear I will not worship. I refuse to give up my tranquility for the appearance of control. You made a silent decision about how you want to appear in this world, while they argue over how the world ought to look. And that decision is more significant in heaven's records than any executive order ever could be. There are still people behind those guarded doors, not just titles and roles, with badges on their chests and security clearances in their eyes. People who have regrets, childhoods, and small, silent prayers they'd never dared to utter aloud at work. Your name swept past hearts as it went through their systems, not just through machines. And some of those hearts experienced an inexplicable feeling, a flaw in the narrative they have been compensated to defend. Their perception of people as categories is a result of their training, liability, asset, threat level, and demographics. However, when your file arrived, it refused to fit into any of those boxes. One thing was revealed by the data. Another thing was said by the atmosphere surrounding your name. You ought to have fallen apart years ago on paper. In some ways, you have grown stronger spiritually than the individuals who researched your risk. They were shaken by that mismatch, because if you could walk through what you did and still carry this much clarity, maybe the system isn't as powerful as they were taught. Perhaps the people they glance at in reports are more fortunate than the ones who read them. Another layer of the shutdown is the chosen one. You didn't simply defy their preconceived notion of you. You subtly destroyed their self-model. After reading your story, a staff member somewhere felt guilty about their own concessions. The idea that true power might be sitting in a small apartment miles away, listening to God in the dark, briefly occurred to someone who believed that power only existed in that building. They weren't arguing with you. You never even got to meet them. However, your presence compelled minds that were meant to be unbreakable to recalculate. Sometimes heaven does not send a lightning bolt to upend an empire. The people inside are suddenly unsure of which side of the story they want to be on again. After just one honest life touches their system, if an outsider were to look at your life right now, they would probably say, "Calm down. Nothing really exciting is going on. The Oval Office is not where you are. The news does not feature you. Nothing is being signed by you." That is the modern era's trick. People are trained to only refer to something as historic when the camera is rolling. However, history is measured differently in God's kingdom. Heaven doesn't give a damn if everyone sees it. God doesn't care if you made the right decision when you had the option to make the wrong one. Heaven counts the times you had every reason to become resentful, dishonest, or numb, but you refrain from doing so, while the White House counts signatures. Because of this, what you're doing now surpasses what many outstanding individuals accomplished with their platforms. They had whole systems in place to keep them safe, provide them with information, and correct their errors. There were nights when God and you were alone. No press team to turn your weakness into a story. No safety net. No speechwriter. They conceded and referred to it as strategy. Under duress, you maintained your composure and referred to it as survival. It looks like they're just trying to make it from down here. From above, it appears as though a human being is accomplishing something that no empire, government, or historical figure has ever done flawlessly. Hold authority without submitting to it. The phrase "you shut down the entire White House" isn't hype because of this. Translation is what it is. It involves translating a spiritual reality into language that people can understand. A law, an order, or a world summit could not legislate what you did in your inner world. It would have been so simple to play the game, but you decided to be honest instead. When going cold would have been safer, you decided to keep your heart alive in heaven's archives. That choice is considered a historic event, even though it doesn't trend on any platform. And whether or not you receive a medal, the consequences of you subtly becoming someone they cannot predict, control, or replace are already being felt by those in positions of authority on this planet. Any system that relies on control has a subliminal fear. The instant it recognizes that there is a type of power that it cannot enact into legislation, impose taxes on, threaten, or reward. That is the current meaning of your life, despite not being a senator, lobbyist, or staffer. You possess a quality that no committee can replicate. A mind that learned to stay awake in a world that begged you to become numb. A conscience that refused to sell itself. And a spirit that refused to bend. Your existence feels like a shutdown to places that operate on fear because you are the chosen one. You exude a sense of authority that is independent of departments or documents. It results from choosing to remain kind in the face of what should have destroyed you. They are unable to control that. They are unable to grant a permit for that. It cannot be voted in or out. Consider it. Governments have the authority to determine what is lawful, but not what is moral. They are able to value money, but they are unable to value your soul. They may make headlines that exalt people, but they can't create the tranquility you feel when you sleep at night knowing that you didn't betray yourself. Heaven was therefore never concerned about your ability to enter particular rooms. When you finally realized who you are, Heaven's biggest worry was whether those rooms would be prepared for you. And now, as you become more conscious, the balance subtly changes. You are no longer pleading to be allowed inside while standing outside. You've come to recognize that you are a government, truth, compassion, bravery, and all that surpasses all trash in structures on this planet. An invisible shutdown occurred when that inner government unanimously decided that you would no longer live in fear, or dependence on their approval. Although the White House remains, their influence over your life has diminished. Anomalies are hated by systems. Anything that deviates from their pattern is analyzed, watched over, or discreetly buried. Your presence alters the invisible code that governs establishments like the White House in that way. Memoranda that you will never see, trainings that you will never attend, and briefings that began the day your file passed through have questions added to them. You revealed a blind spot, not because you posed a threat to anyone. What should we do with someone who didn't come through our channels, isn't broken by what we've already permitted, and can be bought off with what we have to offer? They were ready for manipulators, opportunists, and extremists. They have scripts for those who want to shake hands and take a picture, and protocols for those who want to burn everything down. They weren't ready for someone who genuinely values wholeness over status. someone who refuses to make anyone else their idol or enemy, because they have already battled their own darkness. That subtly exposes how spiritually small many large people truly feel, which is more destabilizing than any threat. Not only does one healthy soul stand out in a sick system, but it also compels everyone to acknowledge the illness they have normalized. Thus, you do, in a sense, shut them down. You rendered some of their outdated procedures ineffective. You demonstrated that not everyone can be controlled by fear or predicted by statistics. We're not sure how to classify this one yet, but some analyst had to write it somewhere. Somewhere, a higher authority had to acknowledge that we might need to adopt a different perspective on individuals such as these. This is just the new method, recognizing that people who don't fit the mold are still being raised in heaven. And heaven grins and silently adds a sentence to the annals of their history each time a system must be rewritten to accommodate a soul that won't shrink or sell out. I was actually studying them, even though they believed they were studying you. I pray that God will grant you peace today, my brothers and sisters. I'm here to remind you of something very important. Unaffected by the transient worries of the world, our existence is rooted in God's divine plan. Whatever you do in faith, God will richly reward you, according to the Bible. Luke 6:38. Our roots are firmly planted in God's universal truth, just like those of that powerful oak tree. His power secures every move we make and every position we adopt. You now have the chance to share in this blessing. You will receive 100-fold return on your investment when you use the Super Thanks button and donate $100. Every true awakening has a point at which you ask yourself, why did I ever think I needed their room to do my work? Rather than, will they ever invite me in? And now you're there. In your mind, the White House has long represented the pinnacle, the highest table, the final stage, and the location of actual decision-making. However, heaven has been subtly changing that perception. You're beginning to realize that some of the most world-changing choices are taking place in locations that no camera will ever be able to capture. You're learning that your task is to create an entirely different atmosphere wherever you are, not to get sucked into their story. This is evident in your direct messages, prayers, everyday decisions, and how you treat those who are unable to return the favor. You're learning how to speak to broken hearts without a teleprompter. While they practice speeches, you're learning to carry presence while they're chasing influence. You are being honed to carry private integrity while they strive to control public image. Your little acts of faithfulness are therefore treated like laws in the spiritual world. Heaven views your decision to choose forgiveness over retaliation as if it were a law that was enacted in your spirit. It's like issuing an executive order over your own fate. You decide that you will no longer live as a victim of what happened to you. The secret punchline is right here. Their rooms lose their impact the more you adopt that persona. You begin to notice the weaknesses in their self-assurance, the anxiety that underlies their authority, and the fatigue that underlies their control. You come to the realization that you never made an effort to catch up. Your heart has been ahead for years in many ways. It has nothing to do with geography. When you shut down the entire White House, it has to do with authority. Although their building may still be standing, it has lost all of its power to define who you are and what your life can entail. You don't have to worry about them opening a door when you wake up from now on. You have one question when you wake up: how can I control my thoughts, words, and love today so that heaven is pleased? God, and you've already surpassed every room that has ever attempted to claim your name in that one question alone. In the past, the mere mention of some titles used to make your stomach turn. White House, intelligence, security clearance, the president, and the Pentagon. You felt like dust at the bottom of those words, which felt like mountains. However, something has changed. Your imagination has been cleansed by heaven. God has been gradually making those names smaller in your mind and making His presence in your spirit more real. You wake up one day and discover that these are merely people in a building who are working on a timeline. God is not running for office again. He does not hold the throne for years at a time. And whoever happens to walk through those halls for a short time has no control over your fate. Another type of shutdown is that silent realization. Their loudest weapon used to be fear. Fear of being observed, fear of criticism, fear of being overpowered by invisible systems. Now, when you hear their names, you feel something different rather than cringe. Viewpoint. You understand that while their signatures can alter events, only God has the power to alter a person's soul. They have the authority to grant or refuse room access. What heaven has already written over your life, they cannot accept or reject. You stop living like a nervous guest in your own story once you realize that you have the demeanor of someone who is aware that the universe's highest authority has already called you by name. You're not arrogant for that. You become free as a result. And the one thing no government on earth can handle is a free individual who fears God more than they fear any human authority. You'd be surprised at how different it is written. If you could read the file heaven keeps on this stage of your life, the story appears disorganized down here. Your name appears in unexpected places. Strange doors open, and strange resistance rises. There were times when it seemed like everyone was against you, and no one understood what you were carrying. It's simple, clean, and frighteningly clear up there. The buildings, titles, and headlines are not highlighted in heaven's report. It highlights 3 points. You remained intact. You did not bow. Additionally, you avoided becoming the monster that attempted to devour you. The White House, the agencies, and the whispers are all footnotes in that report. The main plot point is that you chose transformation over toxicity. When faced with pressure that could have twisted most people, you didn't become resentful when betrayal occurred. You didn't control your fear when it struck. You didn't sell your soul to keep attention when it finally touched your life. That's what caused heaven to rise. That is what transformed your small life into a spiritually significant event. Therefore, realize what we mean when we say, shut down the entire White House. You dispel the myth that they have the last say over who matters, who stands out, and who is remembered. You demonstrate that one devout, civilized, God-centered individual can cost evil more territory than a whole government ever acknowledges in public. And with a single word, heaven has already marked this chapter in your life. Triumph. If most people only read the title and never stay for the message, they will miss this part. It's a permanent shutdown. There is no turning back to thinking in tiny, name-fearing terms or begging systems for scraps once your spirit awakens in this way. The White House has the power to switch presidents, staff, and policies 100 times. What God has already done within you cannot be reversed by any of that. Between waiting for approval and realizing you were commissioned, you've crossed an invisible line. From wishing that someone significant would notice you to realizing that heaven had already done so. Going from avoiding power to walking as someone with a completely different kind of power, unbought, quiet, and clean. However, this type of change was never intended to remain in a single life. Right now, there are people who have the exact same emotions as you did, feeling too small to make a difference. They are afraid of systems and ashamed of their past. Another conspiracy is unnecessary. Another panic headline is unnecessary. They must witness firsthand how one regular person can withstand all of that stress and still emerge compassionate, safe, and spiritually awake. Sharing is important for rescue, not for numbers or pride. You are the world's light. Jesus declared, "You can't hide a city on a hill before anyone else. Let your light shine." Matthew 5:14-16. It is not humble to be a light that is invisible. It's not accessible. You are doing precisely what that verse says when you share a word that has inspired you and when you honestly share your own story. To shine your light in a world that has become accustomed to darkness. Therefore, don't simply close the tab and go on if this struck a chord with you. Have faith in it. Take a seat with it. If you sense that nudge in your soul, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that while governments come and go, God's work within one willing heart endures forever. The shutdown spreads in this way, through clarity, bravery, and silent, infectious freedom through chaos. You don't have to watch in silence. If this message seemed to be reading your mail, and you feel like heaven is using this channel to fortify you, you can get a better view of what we're constructing here. For some of you, the ideal way to collaborate is to just share these videos, leave a comment with your testimony, and offer prayers for this community. You don't realize how much that already means. There is also a join button beneath the video for those who do feel led and are financially secure. A smaller circle congregates there. Those who wish to assist bear the burden of this task in a useful manner. For people who truly feel called to give more, there are higher support tiers, not to buy a favor or a miracle, but to express my belief in this work and my desire to support its continuation. Never give in to pressure, fear, or guilt. You should never give away what you lack. Let God and you make that choice freely and joyfully at all times. Give this clearly whether you ever join or not. Here, your worth isn't expressed in monetary terms. It is determined by your readiness to change, to heal, to remain compassionate in a harsh world, and to allow God to use your life as a shutdown that the world never anticipated.